Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Myslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Autumn Wagner at _authenticallyautumn on Instagram found keto and a carnivore diet after suffering from severe IBD symptoms, depression, alcoholism, anorexia, and arthritis for years. She's used this way of eating in her education through the Keto Adapted course from Maria and Craig Emmerich to manage all these issues and lose over 50 pounds and keep it off. Autumn is dedicating her life to helping others find health and healing through diet and lifestyle. And I'm so excited to have you on the show, Autumn.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Scott. Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to share a little bit about my journey and maybe help inspire others. So this is just great.
Yeah. And I think your story is really interesting and unique. And so let's start there. I'd love to hear, what brought you to this place.
Absolutely. Scott, my story is honestly something that we can go back all the way to infancy. When I was born, I was always a very colicky, sickly child. And I was actually diagnosed with failure to thrive because I just wasn't growing. And, my parents were worried about that. So got that diagnosis, was just always kind of a puny little kid with a lot of, tummy troubles. And as I got older into childhood, I started to develop some other interesting symptoms like a lot of anxiety and even weird skin rashes. I can remember I would get these sores on my scalp, and the doctors never really knew what it was, didn't really have any suggestions for my parents. And I would even get weird sores in my mouth. But anyway, those were probably my main concerning symptoms that I can reflect on and think about as a child, where I just knew something wasn't quite right. But because I was a child, I didn't really understand or really think to make anything of it until I got much older. So that's kind of where it all started. Yeah,
that's crazy. And how did that evolve? Like, how did some of the things you mentioned, like your IBD, your failure to thrive, like how did your health, first of all, how did you start getting involved with like the health system and healthcare? And then how did your health progress from there?
Yeah. So I just kind of went through the motions as a child. The doctors never really made much of it. They were just like, oh, she's just an anxious child with a, nervous belly. They never had much to say about my weird skin rashes or anything like that. But I can remember as a teenager, I was 15 or 16 years old, and I had a very traumatic event happen in my life. And I remember when that traumatic event occurred, literally, Scott, that day is when my super severe IBD symptoms started. Right out the gate, this trauma happened in my life. And then I started having really, really uncontrollable diarrhea, bloating, stomach pains. It was just, Scott, it was terrible. But when, you're 15, 16 years old, I was very athletic at the time. Really, I've always been athletic, but, I was trying to maintain, my social life and my, my sporting events and just life. And what teenage girl wants to talk about having diarrhea, So I just kind of kept it to myself until I became a mother at 20 years old. And I remember I went to my 6-week post-op appointment with my OBGYN just to check things out. And he asked me, Autumn, is there anything else I can do for you today? Do you have any other questions? And I don't know what inspired it, Scott. Maybe it was that maternal instinct of, oh, maybe it's time to take care of myself. But I asked him, I said, as a matter of fact, yes, I'd like to know if it's normal to, and then I explained my bathroom problems to him.
Oh.
And he looked at me and said, no, that's not normal at all. And you need to go see a GI immediately. So that's kind of where I really started to go down that rabbit hole of specialists and, all that with my IBD. I wish I could tell you they had it all figured out, right then and there when I was 20, but unfortunately I went another, I was 34 before I actually received, my celiac disease diagnosis. So I went several more years of a lot of really bad suffering, pretty unnecessarily, but yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Oh, that's all good.
Yeah. And I guess where did you go from there? What did you try? What worked?
Sure. So when I was 20 and they started, doing all these tests on me, they did, at that point, did find that I had a condition called lymphocytic colitis. So it's a microscopic colitis that is in this large intestine. And they really didn't give me any dietary advice at all. They put me on a ton of prescription medicines. If you name it, I've taken it when it comes to treating colitis, Crohn's, conditions of that nature. So I, took the budesonide and all these other crazy drugs and just never got better. So as the years went on, I was getting sicker and sicker with my IBD symptoms. And, when you have stomach problems and you always feel terrible, it really messes with your head. So on top of all these terrible stomach problems I was having, I, was really depressed because it was affecting my daily life. I had a hard time working. It ultimately led to me quitting my career in dentistry. I was just sick on the sofa all the time and wasn't able to be present for my children. And gosh, it was just terrible. But yeah, so I went through that for several more years until I turned 34. I was around 34. I had this one night that I was so sick that I literally thought I was, I don't know, having an appendicitis or dying or something. It was bad. And my husband rushed me to the ER and they did all these tests and they were like, well, honey, your large intestine looks fine. Now, keep in mind, we're all thinking this is colitis at this point. They said that my large intestine looked good, but my small bowel was just wrecked. They were like, honey, you need to go back to your GI doctor like yesterday because your small intestine's severely inflamed. So anyway, back to the GI I went, and they finally did an endoscopy for the first time in 34 years of me having stomach problems. And that's when they found out I had celiac disease. So,
Wow.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah. And, for those that aren't aware, celiac disease is an autoimmune condition. There's a little bit of controversy and discussion as to whether or not lymphocytic colitis is autoimmune or not. Some people say it's triggered by the use of, NSAID pain relievers, which in my case is not the case. I've just always had, troubles, stomach troubles. So I think mine was more autoimmune related, especially considering the celiac. But yeah, so I started, a gluten-free diet immediately because when you have celiac disease, your body reacts to the protein and gluten and it causes your body to turn on itself, right? So yeah, I went gluten-free at 34. I followed a gluten-free diet for about a year. And, one thing I will say is even with the colitis and the celiac diagnosis, I still had never received any dietary guidance from my specialists, other than to say, go gluten-free.
Wow.
Well, yeah. So, being the studious person I am, I love to read and research. I was like, well, I got to know more about this. So I was my own advocate. I did my own research and, very quickly realized that when you need to be gluten-free because you have celiac disease, you have to think about everything, cross-contamination and, going out to eat is complicated. There's just so many different aspects that come into play. And after about a year of eating gluten-free, but still eating like the gluten-free, like processed garbage, like the gluten-free grains and things like that. Oh, Scott, I was so miserable. I didn't feel any better than I did before my diagnosis. I would say my IBD was even worse. I looked pregnant and I wasn't pregnant. It was really miserable. So yeah, I was just really swollen and depressed and stressed out. And that's kind of what led me to start my health journey as far as the keto and carnivore diet goes.
A lot of people ask me about how to make liver more tasteful and how to cook it or incorporate other organ meats on carnivore. Optimal Carnivore can help you do just that with their grass-fed organ complex. It was created by carnivores for carnivores. They start by sourcing 100% grass-fed organ meats from New Zealand, gently freeze-drying the organs and encapsulating them into convenient bovine gelatin capsules. Just 6 of these capsules a day is the same as eating an ounce of raw organ meat. I personally take these every single day, as does my wife. Even though we both eat liver and other organ meats, our ancestors would have eaten the whole animal. And this unique blend has 9 different organs, including beef liver, brain, thymus, kidney, spleen, etc. And I think it's great to get a daily dose of these organs when you can. So it covers all your bases, whether you're at home or traveling. What's also cool is they plant a tree for every product sold, which helps the environment. So visit www.optimalcarnivore.com/carnivorecast and use the code carnivore10 to receive 10% off your purchase. Thanks, and back to the show.
That's so awful. I'm so sorry to hear that. It sounds really tough. My wife has went through something somewhat similar. I won't try to equate it by any means, but she also suffered from a lot of horrible IBD and IBS symptoms and was diagnosed with Crohn's at one point, and then they reversed the diagnosis, and she ended up, cutting certain foods, namely dairy and coffee, in addition to already being carnivore, and I guess carnivore plus. She cut out almonds, and her symptoms went away entirely. And I remember being in the room with her talking to the gastroenterologist who was doing who was working with her, and she told her that, and she was like, "Yeah, I don't think change in diet would have any effect on this." And I was like, "Really? Wow, your digestive system? Like, you're changing your diet is not going to change your digestive system and symptoms around it?" I'm sorry, I don't mean to get on a soapbox, but it was just
I could talk about this all day. I hear it all the time, and I lived it, so I completely understand. I went through a very similar thing, and to have the doctors not ever even ask me, "Well, Autumn, what are you eating?" At the time, I didn't know to even think anything about it. I just took my meds like a good girl and, continued to get sicker. Didn't even think to question. So when I look back on it now, I'm like, I have had lymphocytic colitis since I was like 16 years old. Why in the hell have these doctors never said anything to me about my diet? It's just absolutely asinine to me. So yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. And and you were doing everything right? You were doing what you were told. You're like, it's no fault of your own. You were doing what you thought was best. You were obviously trying really hard. So
for sure. Took all the medicines they recommended to a fault. I, went to all my checkups, this and that. And they would because of course my symptoms weren't getting any better even when I went gluten-free after the celiac diagnosis, and they just kind of threw their hands up in the air. And I can remember at my last GI appointment, which was several years ago now, he just looked at me and he said, "Autumn, you're an enigma. I don't understand why you're still having these problems. Maybe I need to send you to the Mayo Clinic." And that's kind of when it hit me, Scott, that I was like, no, these people don't know what they're talking about. I have got to find a better way. So I'm so grateful that I stumbled upon the keto and carnivore community, because it has literally, and I can't express how heartfelt this statement is, it literally saved my life. So yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And talk about what that was like. Talk about finding it, how you found it, what you latched onto, what you learned.
Yeah. So I can't remember a specific, method of what led me to stumbling upon this, but I do know that in all my research, I ended up stumbling upon Maria Emmerich's blog. And I was like, oh, she's keto. Let me see what this is all about. So I, dug through her blog and then joined some groups on Facebook, I think. And what really appealed to me about that particular lifestyle was that they focused on very clean ingredients and that it was gluten-free. Because, of course, keep in mind, I was pretty fresh in my celiac diagnosis at that time and, not getting very great results with just being gluten-free. So I was like, oh, ingredients matter with this lady. Okay, maybe I can work with this. And, I kind of quietly followed the groups for a while just to kind of see how I felt about it. And then I had planned on starting keto as like a New Year's resolution, but I'll never forget the day. It was December 31st, 2018. I said, you know what? I'm not waiting for January 1. I'm doing it and I'm doing it today. And that's when I cut out all the crap and started following the keto diet and following it the Emmerich way. So it was a big day for me. I was very proud of myself because at that point I was so miserable that I had about enough energy to go to work and get my job done and then come home and lay on the sofa. And I was so sick and depressed that I basically would just binge on junk food and alcohol all night long. It was kind of a sad existence. So to put all that behind me on that day was a very, very big deal. So yeah.
Wow. And talk a little bit about, I know you've talked a lot on your Instagram about alcohol and addiction. But how do you think that has manifested for you or did manifest for you?
So I think it's important to mention that I unfortunately grew up in a pretty dysfunctional household, and I am a child of substance abuse and addiction. My father is an alcoholic. I have a sister that is battling a very severe addiction to heroin, actually, and some other issues in my biological family. And I can't deny the fact that some of that has to be genetically linked. I think some people are just genetically predisposed to having addiction issues. And I knew that my entire childhood and early adulthood, and I always had it in the back of my mind. But we were raised Catholic, and in Catholicism, at least my family's version of it, alcohol was just a very socially acceptable and normal thing to partake in, even at the kids' birthday parties. I mean, we just all drank all the time, right? So I just grew up around alcohol and thought it was just kind of a normal thing to do. And unfortunately, through my decades of, progressively getting sicker and sicker with my IBD symptoms and just my arthritis and all this other junk I had going on, I started soothing the pain with alcohol. I can remember at my sickest before I, started my keto journey, I would literally sit there and think, okay, I feel so bad. I'm just going to drink until I pass out. And that is so sad. But for me, I did it just to numb the pain. And that's just, I know that so many people struggle with that. And it's just so unfortunate because I definitely feel like for me, I wasn't chemically addicted to alcohol. I didn't have any like withdrawal symptoms or need treatment or anything like that to quit. I was using it as a tool to escape. And I think a lot of us do that, and it's just really sad. So I'm so blessed and grateful that I was able to break that cycle because it scared me, especially with the upbringing that I had and knowing that substance abuse is very, very much present in my immediate family. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for being so open and honest about that. That's incredibly difficult. And yeah, I find it really interesting what you say about just being able to quit because you didn't have a chemical dependency. It was more psychological. That's really interesting to me because even with the psychological trigger, just what I know about like habit formation, I would think the chemical, because it is an addictive substance, it would just develop that side of the addiction. Can you talk about like what quitting alcohol was like for you?
Yeah. So for me, like I said, I feel like for me, it was more of a habit and coping mechanism. I did very clean, strict keto, the Emmerich way for probably the first 4 months. Had pretty good success in weight loss. I lost like 30 pounds in those 3 or 4 months. I was very proud of that. Yeah. But I, kind of lost some weight and was feeling better about myself and feeling better physically too. My stomach problems were better, not great, but tolerable. So I started to let those old habits creep back in, Scott. I would, just a drink here or there, it's fine. And, I got right back to the point, slowly that I went from just a drink, on the weekends with my friends to having a mommy beverage, as I called it, pretty much every night again. And I was like, crap, what am I doing? This isn't good. And I knew it wasn't healthy. And I could tell, I have pictures. I should actually probably share like a face-to-face post where you can see I, was keto and had lost some weight. But my face still looked a little puffy, and it's because I was drinking alcohol. My body was inflamed because of it. So it's no wonder I was still having stomach problems. It was at least partially due to the alcohol. So because of that, I got to the point where I didn't see myself really, I didn't feel like my journey was finished. And I just didn't feel overall as healthy as I could be. So I decided on May 17th was the day of this year, May 17th of 2021. Gosh, I had to think about what year it is. I was like, I'm going to try carnivore and I'm going to quit this alcohol crap. So yeah, that's when I quit alcohol for good. And the habit was, when I say it was hard to break. I mean, I went a few weeks of where I was like, oh, I'd maybe like to have a drink, but I was okay. And of course now is, and anyone else that's, been following a carnivore diet or carnivore lifestyle for a while knows I achieved so much mental clarity and just health benefits that I cannot imagine drinking alcohol at this point. I'm just completely free of that. I'm so blessed and happy to say that I definitely will be sober for the rest of my life. And I'm very proud of that.
That's amazing. Congratulations. Yeah. You should be very proud.
You.
And I guess how has carnivore evolved for you over that time? Like what has changed? Both what have you noticed in yourself and what have you changed in terms of how you live your life?
Yeah. So I ended up starting carnivore because I was still having some residual symptoms that I just felt like keto was not healing for me. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a very studious person. I read a lot. I love research. And I just love books. I'm just a knowledge junkie. I knew about carnivore. I had all the books. I followed all y'all on Instagram already. And in the back of my mind, I knew that considering my autoimmune conditions, considering the fact that I knew I really shouldn't be, consuming alcohol or any sugar or grains or anything like that, I was like, I know I need to do this and I just have to do it. So I'm super grateful. I've over the years formed a pretty awesome relationship with Maria Emmerich on a personal level. And I reached out to her one day and I was like, Maria, I've got all this going on still. And my tummy issues are still keeping me from doing the things that I really want to do. And I just feel like I need to do more healing. And she said, well, Autumn, have you tried carnivore yet? And I was like, dang it, I knew you were going to say that. So that's what it took. It took Maria Emmerich herself to tell me, try carnivore for me to do it. But I owe her so much gratitude for that, because with that push, I was able to just dive right in. And I did start on May 17th of this year. I did 30 days of the autoimmune elimination protocol, where for the first 30 days on level 1 carnivore, you just eat beef, salt, and water. So that's how it started. I had some emotional breakdowns in those 30 days. Again, you're just breaking old habits, detoxing. That's a big thing. I think the detox was huge, just getting all that inflammation and crap out of my body from the, not only alcohol, but anti-nutrients from the plant foods I was still eating. I was able to discover that I have a pretty severe egg intolerance. So just getting all of that out of my system, I, within a few days, noticed 95 to 98% relief from my IBD symptoms. My face thinned out almost immediately. My joints stopped hurting. I started sleeping like a baby. And in the first month, I wasn't even trying to lose weight, and I lost 13 pounds. So it was pretty crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Maria's fantastic. Both her and Craig have done
so
wonderful.
Much for I love
community. Them. And despite, their success and their fame and everything, they're also so personable and willing to help every single person. So
yeah, they really are. And I think it is genuine. And I think it really does come from a place of pure love for people and helping others. And I've lived it and I feel it. Of course it's just one of those things where even though I've never met someone in person, I can feel that, genuine care from people. And I definitely get that from them and other people in the community. And it's just it's so awesome. And again, I owe my life to them, really, because
so cool.
I was such a miserable person before I started this whole journey. And in a matter of a few years, I've been able to completely turn my life around, and I'm traveling for the first time in my life. Whereas before I was too sick to, because I couldn't be more than 2 steps from a bathroom at any given point. And, I was just depressed and in pain. And now I just get up and go, and it's amazing. It's just absolutely awesome.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Such a life change.
Yeah.
And what are some things, you spent a lot of time educating yourself with the MREX, the Keto Adapted course, and obviously working with Maria. What are some things that maybe you learned that you carry forward into carnivore, or you think are missed or commonly glanced over by people who just say, eat meat and water? There anything you would borrow or add, or you're glad you have that fundamental education?
Yeah, I think the most important part of this puzzle, and what has worked for me and what has worked with my clients, is establishing your why. Why are you doing it? Anyone can just say, I'm just going to eat meat and water. That's great. But why are you doing it? It's so important, because I'll have some people that just look at, maybe my photos on the internet, and they're like, oh, I want to look like you. How'd you do it? And I'm like, oh gosh, we're going to go down that rabbit hole now. Okay. Because of course my journey, yes, I lost weight and I've kept it off, but it was so much more. It was about reclaiming my life, basically. So I feel like for a carnivore way of living to be sustainable, you have to have a really good why. If it's just to lose weight, I'm not convinced with that. I feel like you need to want it, and want it for good reason. Weight loss is great, but I always say the reason, quote, diets don't work is because people have that mindset that it's a diet, right? So if someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to eat carnivores so I can lose 56 pounds and look like you, I'm like, well, we need to slow down, pump the brakes.
Yeah.
What is it about this lifestyle that is going to be sustainable for you? And that'll get that. I think that's thought provoking and important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge part of it. Yeah.
I can tell you're a really knowledgeable and experienced coach. Because
thank you.
That's really important for helping
I
people.
love it. It's been so fun. And I was able to actually leave my career in dentistry to do this full time. And I'm so blessed because I'm literally like living my dream. I get to wake up every day and help people and not kill my body doing it. I destroyed my shoulder overworking myself in dentistry for 16 years. And, it just my heart wasn't in it. And this is something that I can appreciate so much more because living a keto and carnivore lifestyle has just literally changed every single aspect of my life in such a positive way. And I want to just share it with everybody. So I enjoy it. It's really great.
That's fantastic. That's so great. And Autumn, I know we were chatting before the podcast and you said you asked some of your audience for questions, and one you get a lot but you don't like is what you eat in a day. So I wanted to ask you why you don't like that question.
Oh, that question. I do get asked it at least once a day. And I think it comes from a good place. But what people don't understand is what I eat in a day is completely irrelevant to somebody else's situation. For example, I'll throw this out as an example. Kelly Hogan, she's incredible, right? This woman's so amazing. I love everything about her. She eats 2 pounds of meat a day. Well, if I were to just be like, oh, Kelly Hogan eats 2 pounds of meat a day, so that's what I'm going to do, and everything's going to be great. Well, Kelly Hogan is like 5'10" or something. So, whereas I'm barely 5'3", and I'm a very petite woman, and like my body doesn't need that much energy. So, I struggle when people ask me what I eat in a day because I'm like, I can share foods that I eat in a day with you, but please don't ask me quantities, macros. I get asked macros all the time, And even what I eat in a day when it comes to actual food items might not work for other people. For example, I am a very strict level 2 carnivore out of necessity. Every time I try to reintroduce dairy or eggs, it does not go well. I cannot eat plant foods at all, whereas some people can tolerate some spices and plant foods and whatnot. And I think that's great if that works for you. So I would never want to impose my, restrictions, if you want to call them that. I don't feel restricted. It's great for me, but I just don't ever want anyone to look at what I'm doing and say, that's what I need to do to a T, because we're all different, right? We all have different needs. And I think it's important to address those. So what I eat in a day, folks, I'm happy to share with you, but that doesn't mean you need to be doing it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great answer. I'm so glad you said that because I get the same thing all the time. And I totally get it. It is coming from a good place. People are trying to learn. People are trying to understand. They think you have it figured out. So they want to sometimes not even replicate it. Often it's replicated, but sometimes it's just, I want to see how she puts into practice all these smart things she knows. And it is fine to share that. But I think people need to combine it with seeking to understand why, like you said, getting some of that broader education. We don't need to exist off a meal plan, a cookie cutter meal plan, right?
Thank you. Exactly.
That's not going to help. And even if you had the perfect meal plan for one person, it's never going to be the perfect meal plan for another person. So yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to add to that, I think it's important for people to recognize the fact that what works for one today may not necessarily be the same a year from now. Again, we're all human. We're all evolving. It took me I actually turned 38 a couple days ago. So it took me almost 38 years to, realize that right now, level 2 carnivore works best for Autumn. But who knows, in another year or two, as my body heals. I mean, think about it. My body's been assaulted with undertreated or untreated autoimmune disorder for most of my life. When I was treated, it was with harsh prescription medications that heavens knows what did to the insides of my body. So I have a lot of healing to do, right?
Mhm.
So, who knows? Maybe in a year I'll be able to eat eggs without feeling terrible, or maybe reintroduce some plant foods. I don't know. I'm certainly not interested in going down that rabbit hole right now because I feel so darn good. But, it's just things change. So I think it's important for people to listen to their bodies and take all of their, specific needs and conditions and histories into consideration when they make these decisions, because it's a lifestyle change. It's not just a diet. So that all goes into the equation.
Very well said. Very well said. Well, Autumn, this has been fantastic. I've certainly loved hearing your story and chatting with you. And I'm sure other listeners will really enjoy it too. Thanks everyone for listening. Where can folks find you and get in touch if they want to work with you?
Yeah. So if you want to visit my website, it's authenticallyautumn.com, or you can find me on Instagram. It's @__authenticallyautumn. And I'm also on Facebook under Autumn Wagner. So feel free to reach out to me in any of those areas. I will get right back to you. I'm very responsive and I pride myself in that. So I enjoy hearing your messages, seeing your messages, and I'm always happy to help.
Great. That's excellent. Well, I'll have links to all that in the show notes. And thanks again for your time today, Autumn.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I really appreciate it. Have a great night.
You too.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Carnivore Cast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.